I guess we kind of assume that over time, everything gets better because we develop technology and the Industrial Revolution and, you know, the rise of the internet and AI and so forth. But when you look at the music that some of those composers wrote, you realize that the musicians then at Bach's time, those violinists, must have been incredibly skilled.
Absolutely. Yeah. To consider the level of instrument playing in the 18th century it fascinates me, because from the sources that exist, it's clear that the technical ability of those musicians was something that probably we would be surprised by today by our standards, in terms of how well they must have done. And, yeah, and sung. I mean, it absolutely rattled me to my foundations when I was told that it's most likely that Bach's cantatas were performed without rehearsal at all, a lot of the time, if not all of the time. So yeah, I'm not up to that in terms of being a professional in the 21st century. I would need time to rehearse and practice. So considering they did it without electricity, without central heating, probably in the dark, with instruments that might not have been maintained that easily or that well, because it's really hard to maintain these instruments. You think, well, I guess I better stop making excuses for myself. If they could do it in the 18th century, I better be able to do it now with my heating and my fancy luthier down the street. It's fascinating to consider that. As a professional violinist, I specialize, as your audience probably knows, in performance practices from the 18th century, and I play a Baroque violin. Even when I play with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra, the violin I'm playing is in fact a Baroque violin, and that means that I use different strings than the other players. They're made entirely of natural gut. And I usually, when I play with the orchestra, I'll use a modern bow, just because it's easier to conform and to match the other players. But the violin I'm playing is indeed from the 18th century, and it resembles what the equipment that Bach would have had himself when he was composing for the violin. And I think that Bach, he's one of the greatest musicians to have ever walked the planet. And I believe that he managed to explore the depths and the variety of sound of the violin in his compositions in a thorough way that I don't think any other composer had done to that point. If you take the 6 pieces he wrote for violin, the very famous sonatas and partitas for solo violin, it's a universe of musical possibilities on the instrument. And while he was a fantastic violinist, he was one of the greatest keyboardists, but he was also a great violinist. He would direct orchestras from the violin and viola sometimes. While that's the case, even so, this music for violin is so difficult that it's hard for people today, professional violinists today, it's really hard to manage it. And so it's not that I doubt Bach's ability. He was a phenomenal musician, to be sure. I just don't see how he would have had the time necessarily to practice it for himself.